Hi, this is Kayla from 9CI. I'm here today with Bruce.
Hi.
We're going to be discussing tinfoil hats.
Tinfoil hats.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, to dive right in, what is electrosensitivity?
Yeah, that's how this video all started, right? You
Yeah.
You see on the internet, anytime there's anything negative mentioned about somebody that's electrosensitive, they call them a tinfoil hat person, right? So I'm going to take this off right now because it's very warm. An electrosensitive person, I used to be highly electrosensitive. It's somebody that's basically suffering from long-term low-level radiation poisoning. Not poisoning, but a sickness. And this has been documented since the 50s. If you're exposed to RF radiation, microwave radiation for a long period of time, you can develop symptoms. And I was in that boat.
So how did you come across this environment?
Yeah, it was a total accident and ignorance. Twice in a row, I lived really close to cell phone base station towers. And if you don't know what they are, if you just look on the top of many apartment buildings, you'll see these white rectangular antennas, and those are cell phone base station. And that's how everyone's cell phone works. I mean, they're talking to a base station. So that's fine, but if you live close, like, within a few hundred meters of these places, your long-term exposure levels to microwave radiation can be quite high. So twice in a row, not just once, but twice in a row.
Didn't learn your lesson the first time.
No, well, I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know. I thought it's sort of like, well, no, what I was taught growing up was the certain safety standards that are in place. We'll get into it more in this video. I thought they were fine. So I didn't question it. And so for a total of about 10 years, I was living near these cell phone towers. And,
That's quite a long time.
and I started, well, it creeps up on you slowly, but it was a declining health. And it starts with not being able to sleep as well. And you just think, oh, life, stress going on.
Yeah, symptoms easily written off with daily stress, day-to-day life.
Yeah, and most medical professionals here in North America would just chalk it up to,
Diet,
exercise, give you a pill for it, something like that, and not look at your environment, and in particular the sleeping environment. So anyway, this went downhill, and finally I came across some information. And the thing is, I should know, I've been a licensed ham radio operator since the age of 13. And that also contributed to my electrosensitivity because, with radio electronics theory and all engineers that train in school, that go to school, they are taught that unless the amount of radiation, RF microwave radiation, is actually physically heating up your tissue, then no problem.
Right.
That's what I was told. That's what I believed. Unfortunately, now we can look at DNA and see that's not the case.
Well, that's what we all believed then. But now we know better, or can know better.
Or can know better, exactly. So as a kid, I was exposed to, after I got my ham radio license, I got really interested in microwave and millimeter wave communications, which is not a normal thing, to do. Part of my abnormalities in life.
Unique.
Yes, thank you. It's a better way of saying instead of. So I had fairly high levels of exposure already. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a living situation where this is 24/7 all the time. At least with hobbies like ham radio, they're short-term exposures. Right? And so anyway, what happens, you get exposed to it over years, your body gets more and more worn down from it, and your natural defenses, your ability for your body to rebuild and heal, gets affected, and suddenly it catches up with you. And when I made the connections between these two things, it was unbelievable. It was this huge thing, and it has taken me years. It's taken me years to get back to a point where I'm, feeling better again. Just by being aware of where I am and making changes.
Simple changes, right? Quite often.
Well, it depends. I mean, in many cases, people they might have to move. Fortunately, there's lots of products that are available. We'll get into how this works to shield, to protect yourself from this, and that's why we're talking about this video.
Tinfoil hats.
Yes.
So back to what you said about long-term radiation sickness. What is radiation?
Right. Okay. So there are two kinds of radiation. We've gone over this. You've gone over this in videos. So we're asking this question for you people out there. Yeah. So there are two kinds of radiation: ionizing radiation and non-ionizing. And ionizing radiation are X-rays and gamma rays, things which we now know are very dangerous. For example, when somebody gets an X-ray, it's generally accepted that you don't want to have too many of these procedures done. And the X-ray technicians that are working in labs or hospitals, they wear these protection aprons, suits, and they step behind a wall. And but in the early days of X-rays, we didn't do this. We didn't know. So those are very dangerous. Those are high energy waves that are capable of doing lots of damage. And again, like I said before, the non-ionizing radiation, what we are told, what engineers are told, what all technical people are told when they go to school is that unless the microwave radiation is at a high enough level to cause thermal heating, that you're good to go. The good thing now is that we can actually look at DNA. And we have seen and continue to see single and double strand DNA breaks and what can lead to cell mutation at levels that are much lower than the current safety standards, right? So when you hear the term radiation, we don't want to confuse radiation. Normally that word is associated with nuclear radiation, like Chernobyl or Fukushima,
right?
And that is dangerous, high energy ionizing radiation. But the term radiation is the same. It's the same thing. It's an energy that is being transmitted through. It's an electromagnetic field that's being transmitted through the air. There's many theories on that. We won't get into that right now. But it's energy that's being transmitted. So the term radiation applies to microwave radiation as well as ionizing radiation, just different frequencies.
So you're getting into shielding versus absorbing. Why wouldn't you just walk around in a giant lead suit to protect yourself all the time?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good question. So here's what's happening and what started this whole thing. Excuse me. I'll grab my makeshift tinfoil hat again. Is people are confusing the term radiation and the protection that they see when they get an X-ray. So they think that shielding a portion of their body, they're thinking that X-rays are behaving the same way as microwaves, and X-rays are much higher frequency and more focused. We can't. It's very difficult for us to visualize X-rays because the closest thing we have to visualize how X-rays work is with light. So if I had a flashlight and I rudely shone it in your eyes, you would put your hand up there to block the light. Right. If I don't want anybody to see my face, I'm gonna do this, right? That is blocking the reflected radiation from our lights here to hitting the camera, and that's the way X-rays work. Microwave radiation, a much lower frequency, on the other hand, can go through things, can bounce off of things, can be absorbed by things. So the problem with tinfoil hats is that you put this on and it's like, okay, what is that? What is this thing doing? Well,
making you look awesome.
Thank you.
But what else is it?
Sexy. Aside from giving me my artificial hair.
Yeah.
No, it actually potentially could be causing more problems by the way microwave radiation works and how it can reflect off surfaces. So
it's reflecting not only what's coming at your head, but reflecting into your head, making a potentially. So this gets into antennas at microwave frequencies or any radio frequency. Higher radio frequencies, antennas become smaller because the wavelength gets smaller. But really, if you think about it, I mean, the shape of some of these things can be similar to they can have properties similar to a parabolic dish. And in this center area, we'll use this as our reference area, but if you look at a parabolic dish, there's a natural focal point, a fulcrum of a parabolic dish. And so what happens is energy coming into the dish will get reflected and everything will wind up in a single point area. And so potentially what you're creating with things like this or waistbands, I mean, this is something that's concerning to me too. Women that are expecting, that are pregnant, they wear these pregnancy bands, and they're made out of RF shielding material, shielding absorbing material, and they wear this around their waist. But some of the ones that I've seen are only shielding on one side, and so what you're doing is essentially creating a small little reflector. And so if we make the analogy, this is a pillow, and let's say I'm a few months, 6 months pregnant or something like this.
At least.
Is this going to offend people on the internet? This is going to offend people. Are you offended by this? I'm just using this to make a point.
Yeah.
So let's say.
Well, at least 8, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, we're up to 8.
Okay. So let's say this is the unborn child here, and then you put a reflector or an RF shielding material around, but only just in this one area of your body. Well, potentially RF coming in from the back that's actually going through you could be reflected and actually concentrating RF in areas inside of you, and
right where the fetus or the unborn
child is. Yeah, and that's a concern, and so the only way to effectively shield yourself completely is to put yourself in what's called a Faraday cage, and we'll have an illustration of a Faraday cage here. Basically, that's RF conductive shielding material. It can be a wire mesh. The gap between the squares of a wire mesh can be very large depending on the frequency. But let's say, the kind of the bug screen that you're used to seeing in Windows, aluminum bug screen. If you had a complete shield of that, any transmitter source inside there, or if you're inside there, nothing is going to get in or out of that. Nothing's going to get, microwave radiation won't get in or out of that. And that is the only way. If that Faraday cage is opened up, then suddenly you're introducing the option for reflected microwave radiation, for reflected RF to go in there, bounce around, and in some cases be concentrated.
Right. How
can this happen? Well, here's an example. This is what's called a Yagi antenna. Okay, this is a basic antenna design concept. We have, let's see, we've got the reflector, driven element, and director here. And this is where all the RF energy is coming from on an antenna. Okay? Now, that on its own is going to have a radiation pattern which is pretty uniform in all directions. But by adding another element that's longer at a certain distance, and another element that's shorter at a certain distance, we have now made this antenna, if we would have, let's say, a fourth director, we would have 10 times the power coming at your direction compared to the back side of this antenna.
Right.
And these are just pieces of metal. These are pieces of metal. There's nothing, yes, it's all connected with metal, but as far as RF is concerned, as far as DC potential is concerned, this is all just ground. But these elements are acting as radiators. This is the driven element. This thing is directing energy this way, and this is a gain antenna, the simplest type of gain antenna. So my point again is, unless you're in an RF shield, a complete Faraday cage, unless you're in an environment like that, having partial Faraday cages or partial shielding might protect certain areas by reflecting microwave radiation, right. But in other areas you're potentially asking for problems
multiple times.
And this is what's frustrating, because the people that are most vulnerable right now, the tinfoil hat people, the people that
are most desperate.
Yeah, exactly. That's the word I would use when I was in that situation, is desperate. They're believing all this, that's out there. I mean, we see these pregnancy bands, we see these crystals that you put on the back of your phone, and it's just like, no, that's not going to prevent your phone from radiating, because obviously if you can still make a phone call on it, then
it's not working.
Then it's not working. But the problem is the engineers out there that know the difference, that understand how RF works and Faraday cages, well, they make fun of the tinfoil hat people because they don't know. And that's okay, I can understand that. But the problem is two-sided, is that the engineers out there are under the assumption, as most are, that unless the radiation is a certain level, that you have thermal levels, exactly, you have nothing to worry about. So on one hand, you've got people that are vulnerable, desperate, and unknowledgeable, and then you've got engineers that have been told all their life that
are knowledgeable,
you're right, and the ones that have never been exposed to that high level of microwave radiation carry on, you know. But what's happening now is we're seeing more and more people start to become aware of this, because the environment is getting
a little bit more.
There's more all the time.
Irradiated?
Yes, the radiation levels are increasing all the time.
Right. So, speaking of cell phones, for the back of your phone, are cell phones safe? Kind of a big loaded question.
That depends. When I hear people saying that you cannot use your cell phone because it's dangerous, no, that depends on how close you are to a cell phone tower. This is my cell phone. Yes, I was, and I would consider myself an electrosensitive person, right? But I know that the nearest cell phone tower is about 400 meters away from here, and I have an accurate RF meter, a tester, a device that actually tells me. So the benefit of modern cell phones and modern smartphones is that they adjust their power level depending on how close they are to a cell phone site.
Right.
So actually, in this environment, pretty much the amount of energy coming from the cell phone when I'm on the phone is not much higher than the background radiation level from the tower itself, or neighbors' Wi-Fi routers or decked cordless phones. So in that case, not a concern. But let's say I was a few miles from a cell phone tower. Well, this thing would be chunking out all kinds of power.
To communicate with the faraway tower.
To communicate with the faraway tower, right? You know, so and then you're doing this, and that's a problem. So
or walking around with it in your.
Exactly, and smartphones, they're not transmitting just when you're talking on the phone. Smartphones are constantly sending and receiving data because people have apps installed, tracking their motion, Facebook, whatever. You'd be surprised if you get an RF meter that measures. You'll be amazed at what comes off of a cell phone, even though you're not talking on it. So there is no answer to that. The only way to know if a cell phone's safe is if you test it. When I hear blanket statements from people is that don't use cell phones, that could have applied maybe 15, 20 years ago when the first analog cell phones came out. When I say analog, I'm talking about non-digital pulse. They were transmitting at a high power level all the time. So
the world isn't black and white. There's no such thing as black and white.
Exactly. This is what we're talking about. That's a good point.
And we like boxes, but you can't put everything in a box.
No, you can't. This is what we're talking about. What this video essentially is, we're talking about this gray area here, right?
Okay, so we were discussing cell phones and why they're safe, and how you got over your illness, the symptoms from your illness, how you made yourself better, and then you mentioned RF meters. What would you use it for? Right.
So measurement to know what's going on, right? To know what's going on in your environment, and the problem is that there are so many RF meters on the market. There are dozens, if not 100, different kinds of RF meters, and most of them, to be honest, are not accurate, and that makes me very angry now, especially since becoming very involved in this field and actually being involved in design and manufacture
of good meters. Yes, we make the Safe and Sound Pro meter, but this is not an advertisement video for that.
Yeah.
It's just making a case that most of the meters that are available on the market make certain claims about their sensitivity and covered frequency range, and it's and so what could be happening is that your meter is showing that your Wi-Fi router is fine, but if your Wi-Fi router is only using the 5.6 gigahertz band, your meter might not be measuring anything.
Yeah.
So it's very important that meters are accurate. The other thing is, in particular for sleeping areas, that is a very important area in your home. That's the time when your body heals, and so the sleeping area has to be quiet. And yes, I mean,
not just parties.
Not just parties or barking dogs in this part of the world, but I'm talking quiet RF, microwave radiation quiet. And a good meter will show you. And the idea is you just it gets in. Yeah, it's going to be an edit there.
That's okay. The RF meters not only measure your environment for accuracy, but if you're producing something, how would you know that your meter isn't, like if you're a person that just bought a meter, how would you even know it's not working? Because you have nothing to claim it to unless you have a bunch of other meters to compare it to.
Right.
And meters that are accurate.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to prove that.
Right.
The consumer, at the consumer level, you wouldn't be able to prove that your meter is not working.
Right. So that's my point is that if you're going to buy a meter to measure this, find out about its accuracy. And
that's why we got into it, to
that's
produce
why
the standard.
Exactly, to establish a standard. Our meters are tested in an RF lab. We can even show a picture of it here. That's an anechoic chamber. What you're seeing is there, and that those materials absorb RF. They don't reflect RF, and so it's an accurate environment to measure a meter's performance and frequency response, and that's what we're doing with that.
And hopefully, the other meter manufacturers will get on board.
That is the hope, because right now people that are not well, that are in a desperate situation, are relying on meters that are potentially not. They might indicate possible concerns, but it's not a definitive answer of what's going on.
Right. And so, with all of these issues popping up, this new 5G and everything, how would you propose people survive in these environments? How would you deal with these new environments that we're producing?
Right. So this is the thing. I mean, the extreme reaction, and I understand if you're an electrosensitive person that's been overwhelmed with this,
Even if you're not.
Yeah, exactly.
You're still getting irradiated, even if you're not electrosensitive.
Right, exactly. I was going to make a point earlier in the video. I think I forgot. Is like why do some people react to RF and other people don't, right? And it's the same thing. Let's say we take 10 people, and in each of these people are given a couple of shots of tequila. Well, if I were one of those person, 2 shots of tequila, I'd be this goofy, out of control person that probably should wear a bicycle helmet.
More boisterous than usual.
Well, I become very giddy and funny. Right, but there are going to be other people, even with the same size, that are not going to feel it. Right.
Yeah.
So everybody's chemistry is different. Everyone's immune system works differently. Their state, and when I say immune system, I mean repairing any potential damage. It depends on how healthy you are. But somebody that's been exposed long term to microwave radiation is going to have a compromised immune system,
especially higher levels as a child.
Exactly. So, how do you move forward? Well, you have an accurate meter to show what's going on, and you take measurements. And if you need to move your sleeping area into a different area of your home, look, I use a cell phone. I sometimes use a Wi-Fi router. But when I don't need it, I turn it off. And when I am using this technology, I know, again from the discussion with the cell phones, I know the power levels that are coming off this thing. So I'm going to take what we would call a precautionary approach to things, right? So let's say there's
there's strong arguments that the current safety standards are fine, and there are strong arguments that the current safety standards are need to be changed. Let's say we don't want to get into that debate right now, but in the meantime, until it's definitively tested and proven, and until we find out, let's just take a precautionary approach to this kind of thing and just be like, okay, well, there's lots of things moving forward to use technology to use it safely.
And how hard is a precautionary approach when all you have to do is turn off the power to something that you're not even using?
Right. Exactly. Unfortunately, I think history has shown that we're slow to learn. And the whole concept of a precautionary approach. The early days of X-rays.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the scientists that were involved in the invention of X-ray tubes, you know, the early days, they all got really sick.
Yeah.
You know, most of them, I think all of them, cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know now, there's a reason why you're only allowed a certain amount of X-rays or suggested. There's a reason why the technicians wear these suits, as we talked about. Well, now we know. But there was a time in history where shoe stores had crude X-ray tubes and X-ray displays where you tried on a pair of shoes and you put your foot in there. The levels of X-rays, the dosage that you got was crazy.
Well, I bet. Yeah, they probably weren't even properly insulated.
No, now we know. Mm-hmm. But look at what's happened again later on. Ionizing radiation, in other words, from nuclear radiation.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of nuclear weapons testing, for example, the amount of people that were exposed as test subjects, it's crazy. Well, now we know, but we're slow to learn. New materials, asbestos. Tobacco. It's another thing. Some people even saying microwave radiation potentially can be, tobacco 2.0, right? And having gone through what I went through, I believe it. And so, yes, I'm concerned about what's going on in the future, but I think with accurate testing, RF meters, awareness, and a precautionary approach, I think we can move forward. Changes have to be made once we know, transmitter power levels, maybe the design of cell phones. But I'm optimistic that there is a way to move forward with technology and not be on the extreme end and be labeled a tinfoil hat person and be mocked by engineers. And again, I understand from both sides because I have and am sitting on both extreme ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so it's frustrating to hear this information out in the internet when you see YouTube comments about people making these claims and mocking somebody that's, suffering from low-level microwave radiation.
Frustrating place to be.
It's a frustrating place to be. Hopefully this video and this little talk will help.
We can hope. Well, thank you very much, Bruce, for talking with us.
My pleasure, Kayla. Okay, see ya. Bye.
Bye now.